March 26, 2018 special meeting for the Woodbridge Township Board of Education will please come to order. Please rise for a salute to the flag and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call, Mr. Secretary. Will you please note that Mr. Molnar and Mr. Delapietro have work obligations, and Mr. Harris, I believe, is en route.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Sedana?
Here.
Mr. Tamburello?
Here.
Mr. Velez?
Here.
Ms. Zullo?
Here.
And Mr. Treebwasser.
Here. Mr. Secretary, as required by the Sunshine Law, please read the notice of meeting.
Thank you, Mr. President. The New Jersey Open Public Meetings Law was enacted to ensure the right of the public to have advance notice of and to attend the meetings of public bodies in which any business affecting their interest is discussed or acted upon. In accordance with the provisions of this Act, the Board of Education has caused notice of this meeting to be published by having the date, time, and place thereof posted as follows. March 12, 2018, it was emailed to the Home News Tribune, the Star Ledger, and the Municipal Clerk's Office, posted in Avenel Middle School and the Board of Education Administration Building.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Will somebody make a motion to approve the minutes from the previous board meeting?
So motion.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Zullo. All in favor?
Aye.
Carried. Policy and Planning Agenda. Ms. Anderson?
Thank you, Mr. President. The Policy and Planning Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools, presents the following one item. I move for the adoption of the foregoing.
I have a motion by Ms. Anderson. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Velez. Are there any comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Please state your name and what part of town you're from, Mr. Pinkowitz from Islam.
David Pinkowitz, Island. I have a few concerns with the policy and planning agenda, which is, just to make clear to those listening, that is to change the school calendar. One concern is just that it was presented at a special meeting where no such announcement was made that this will be discussed, so other people don't have the opportunity, like myself, who are here, to express their concerns one way or the other. But second of all, the calendar, the formerly adopted calendar, was very, very clear in terms of make-up dates if we were to need extra days. And those dates were during spring break. I understand there's an issue with Indiana School 18, although there's certainly other dates available potentially to make up that one extra day. But it seems to me changing the last day of school is not appropriate, given that the board informed everyone what the rules would be in advance of the winter. Second, one question which isn't clear here because it doesn't mention it, is my understanding is graduation typically must occur after the last day of school. Is graduation being moved? Is that the intent?
No, it is not, Mr. Pinkowitz.
Was there some kind of waiver from the state allowing it to be before the last day of school?
No. The diplomas, well, we will have the ceremony, but the diplomas will not be issued until the last day of school is complete.
So here we have, so now you even further complicate the situation. You have project graduation, you have school, and after that occurs, it seems like a very odd situation, and this doesn't seem to be, well, one, it doesn't seem to be appropriate, like I said, because no one had notice that this was occurring. And two, it just seems to be violating the promise you made when you adopted the original calendar that make-up days would occur first the Friday before, which is done. Then the last Friday of spring break is the second day, and that should be the next day off, not adding back June 22nd. So I completely disagree with this. I think you should go back to the promise that was made. Indiana School 18 is a special exception, and there could be things done with that, whether it be Memorial Day or some other day. But I think it should go by what was agreed to, and that the day off should be that Friday, and that the summer should not start a day later, that kids should not be after graduation, my understanding of the state's requirements, which started when I was a child. I mean, it used to be when I was like in kindergarten, they used to end weeks before the end of the year. But it's for like upwards of 40 years plus, the requirement's always been the last day of school. I don't understand this proposal. I don't understand it not moving graduation, if that's the intent. And keeping graduation, keeping project graduation, but having the last day of school a day later makes no sense. So kids are going to be released, I forget the time project graduation ends, at 3, 4, whatever time it is, and they're supposed to go to school. It just makes no sense. And they will have to attend school, right? I mean, if otherwise they don't get their diploma unless they're sick or have some other excused absence. So it just makes no sense to me. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkowitz. Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
I apologize for being late, but I am familiar with the agenda. I will be voting yes. Thank you.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Zullo?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. Finance and Insurance, Mr. Tamburello.
Finance and Insurance Committee, on recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools and Business Administrator Board Secretary, presents the following 2 items. I move for the adoption of the foregoing 2 items.
I have a motion by Mr. Tamburello. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Anderson. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
To the Board President,
Yes, sir, Mr.
I do
Tamburello.
not have any comments this evening, but as I do every year, I will be spending time with Mr. Wolferman, which I've done already, and certainly Dr. Zaga, and just ask for your cooperation as you've given me every other budget process previously. So nothing for this evening, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Tamburello. Are there any comments or questions from the public?
All right. David Pinkowitz, Island. Is there any, no, I mean, obviously the board has seen the tentative budget, or should have seen the tentative budget, while the public has not yet. What cuts, any major cuts that will be made, any major expenditures that will be occurring, that you could announce in general, at least, if not the specific dollar amounts?
Right now, it's still a process and a working document. We're still moving around the money. What we're adopting is the overall amount. So that's where we're at with it.
Okay. Is the expectation of that from last year's budget, whatever the appropriate increase that's allowed, that this money will be sufficient, or that there'll be the need? I mean, is it like, so, or is the expectation that everything that existed last year will be paid for this year, plus whatever else new that you need?
Our intent is to keep programs where they are.
All right, thank you.
Roll call, Mr. Secretary?
Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Mr. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Sedana?
Yes.
Mr. Tamburello?
Yes.
Mr. Velez?
Yes.
Ms. Zullo?
Yes.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes. In keeping with our past practice, we will open this portion of the meeting for statements from the public. If you wish to say something, please come to the microphone, provide your name, address for the record. Please limit your comments to no more than 5 minutes in accordance with Regulation 1100D.
All right, David Pinkowitz, Island. At the last meeting that I was unable to attend, but I saw that the students who spoke eloquently about some issues with the walkout. And I just had just a couple comments. One, you know, in the previous meeting before I guess it was the February meeting, Mr. Molnar had spoken about meeting with the students, trying to figure out a way to handle things. But after that, there kind of went, the administration, the school district went into silence. There was really there might have been feedback to the students. I know there was a meeting scheduled, I believe, that week, or someplace close to that meeting. But as far as like the general public that heard Mr. Molnar's comments, there really was no feedback. There was nothing. Then we get close to it. For those of us who had kids in school, like in high school, middle school, or specifically the high schools, I think maybe more of an announcement. Middle schools didn't really say much. At least my middle school didn't say much in advance. You get told, well, we're not participating. There'll be a threat of suspension. I'll be honest, I've never understood the threat of suspension. If you leave school, that you'll be suspended so you don't have to go to school. But that's a different issue. But at the same time, there was an inconsistency, as we found out, between the way the different high schools handle things. And that I think is somewhat the responsibility of central administration, because there has to be communication. I mean, we can't expect every principal to know what everyone else is doing, but there should be some level of consistency amongst the schools, whether that is to say we are not allowing it, whether it's to say we're allowing it but on school grounds, which I believe is what some of the schools did, or even if you go the extreme that Kennedy did, which is to say we're not allowing it at all, at least make that announcement, make it clear, make it consistent. The one concern I did have is, as you know, which was reported by the children that spoke at the last meeting, there was a shelter-in-place order at the middle school. We recognize that there's a need for security drills. They're required. Between fire drills and security drills, drills are required by the schools. In addition, and if there would be an actual emergency, we expect those drills to be put into use and put into action. I think it's completely inappropriate to ever use a security, what effectively is like acting like a drill, but in a non-emergency situation, for something that isn't a drill and isn't an emergency. You want everyone to react in accordance with their training, but when you start training them that the drills don't really mean anything, they're just a way to control the students, I think you'll lose a little bit of that. So I think that should be a close look. I don't know if it's been done before or done at other schools, but we definitely shouldn't be using security procedures in a non-emergency situation or in a non-drill situation. And I think it was just handled badly. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Pinkowitz.
Mr. Treebwasser?
Yes, Mr. Harris?
Yes, good evening. Could Dr. Zega or yourself speak to what Mr. Pinkowitz just said about the shelter in place at Isla Middle School, was it? Could you shed some light on that? Is that the case?
Dr. Zega will absolutely look into it and find out. I don't know that factually that was what was done or not.
Okay.
But I do know that all the principals were given the same directive in writing, and they were all told to meet with their student bodies and to come up with something. And the young gentleman who did speak so absolutely eloquently did say that he went to the principal the day before and realized that he hadn't given enough time. The day of. Absolutely, Dr. Zega is revisiting with all the principals to find out what we did well, what we didn't do as well as we could have, and that these types of opportunities will present themselves again, and the goal is to improve on it. I don't expect everybody to get things perfect the first time, but we did have one school that did an outstanding job, and they did an outstanding job more because of the students, I think, than the administration of the school. The students were well coordinated. They worked very diligently to make sure they let the administration of the school know what they were looking for. And I believe that was the position that the board was looking for, was to have the students develop a plan so that they could show what they believed in, and also, while staying within the parameters of our policies and procedures, that they could have an opportunity to support what was going on. So the schools that didn't do it as well as they could have, we'll revisit that and try and improve on it for next time. And the ones that did do it, maybe we can use them as a best practice. Does that answer it for you, Mr. Harris?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I look forward to the follow-up.
I do too. Thank you very much. Is there any other comments from the board? The chair will entertain a motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Motion by Mr. Harris, second.
Second.
Second by Mr. Sedana. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.